Hello, everybody. It is another episode of Astrology for Awakening. I am Nafa Perkins of Electra Astrology, and in this show, I am going through all of the facets of every sun sign. These are episodes that I have been recording and releasing on my podcast since 2023, but I'm editing them and bringing them to YouTube because I want to have all of these teachings be a standalone body of work that you can reference whenever you want. So these ones are available on YouTube only. So that's for all of you that hang with me here. We're going to go sign by sign. I'm using an approach of diving into your own psychology, understanding your own source connection and spirituality and life purpose and mission and emotions and all of that, using astrology as our organizing tool. So we're beginning in Sagittarius season. These episodes work really well if you just want to go through the series and listen, because they are designed to help you self-inquire and see yourself differently and awaken and heal and do all of that stuff that we all want to do, right? So the first few episodes, because I'm taking them from my podcast, they're not on video. So you can just relax and listen to them podcast style. As we get into the teachings, we're going to go through all 12 of the zodiac signs. Then we will start having video. But for now, it's all about the listening. Kick back, relax, and let's dive into Sagittarius and Gemini. These two go hand in hand. You can't have one without the other. You are working with this axis all the time. Because you know why? It's the axis of the mind. It's how we think. It's how we perceive information and take it in. And we're doing that all the time. We're very busy mental creatures. All right, I hope that you enjoy this. If you like my style and you would like to book a private reading with me or do an apprenticeship or a mentorship, you can find my work at electraastrology.com. Let's jump in. Sagittarius is all about what you believe. It's ruled by the planet Jupiter, belongs in the 9th house, and it relates to your belief systems, the things you've been taught, things that you have found out on your own through travel, adventure, reading, education. With Sagittarius, we begin to formulate our view of the world, but our vision of the world is not always full nor accurate. It can be very swayed and it can be very conditioned. So ideally, as we move through our lives, we look to disentangle some of what we've been taught and just accepted as our quote unquote beliefs versus what we have learned and what we feel in our heart as being true. And then we develop our own body of work, so to speak, our own belief system that resonates, that didn't just come from somebody or something outside of us. We weren't just told to believe it. We believe it because we have explored it thoroughly and we've had life experiences that has given us some objectivity. So we are going to talk about Sagittarius and Gemini because you can't have one sign as a standalone sign in the zodiac. It always has a partner, and that is the sign that is directly across in opposition. And in the case of Sagittarius, it's Gemini. And this is an axis of the mind, of the intellect. So that said, before we really dive in, take a minute and ground. Take some deep breaths into the center of your body. Rearrange your body. If both feet are not on the floor, put them on the floor. Feel the stability of the ground underneath you. What kind of messages is your body giving you? We talk a lot about the body in Taurus season. As we progress through the winter in the Northern Hemisphere and the sun is moving through all of the transpersonal zodiac signs, we can lose touch with the body easily. And we're talking about Sag and Gemini, which is the axis of the mind. Most of us, in most cultures, in fact, but especially in our United States culture, we are taught and trained to give attention to the mind, mostly. We are taught that our thoughts, our intellect, the facts, the things that people tell us, the things that we read, the way that we process and ruminate and obsess is how we work life. And that is simply not accurate. When we lose touch with our physical body, we lose touch with our heart, And we forget that our physical body has all of these messages and all of this information. So the mind is incredibly useful and we need it and we use it every moment of every day. But you yourself know that mind can run away. And we can lose large patches of time because we are lost in our mind. So coming back into the body, having a practice, a breath practice or a grounding practice is a really valuable thing. Even if all you remember to do is to take a few deep breaths a few times a day. When we are caught and busy and looping in the mind, we lose touch with the present moment. And it's cliche, but the present moment is where it's all happening. Nothing is happening outside of the present moment except our memories and our fantasies. As we look at Sagittarius and Gemini and how these two go hand in hand with one another, let's start off with Gemini. Gemini is ruled by the planet Mercury, and it belongs in the third house. Mercury also rules the sign of Virgo, and that belongs in the sixth house. So Mercury is a planet that is connected to the mind and to the nervous system. With Mercury, it is such a fast-moving planet, and we get busy with Mercury. In the case of Mercury as the ruler of Gemini, this is a busy mind. Gemini is what you think. So it rules the information, the things that you read, the conversations you have, the social media you scroll, the facts that you take to be true. It also rules that mental chatter, the direction of your thoughts. Gemini and Mercury are connected to perception. So we know that perception is very subjective. And in fact, our perception shifts and changes, even with something as simple as our blood sugar level or the phase of the moon, or if you're a female, your hormonal cycle. Stubbing your toe can change your perception of the world. Having a head cold or eating a really delicious pizza. All of these things change our perception. And they are also influenced, whether we enjoy them or hate them, they are influenced by our perception. So we can't really rely on perception in the same way that we can't really rely on our thoughts about something. Because if you're having a conversation with one person and they sway you because they are rational and logical and their argument makes sense, and then you have conversation with another person and they have the opposite viewpoint, but they are also logical and rational, your perception is swayed. And even when we say facts, quote unquote facts, being under this archetype of Gemini, it's hard to know what a fact is. Many people believe in differing facts. Another piece of this Gemini archetype that I always find to be the most interesting is that it is about the present moment. It's about our immediate environment. When we are lost in our mind, or we're out having conversations with people, or we're reading or scrolling social media, or we're researching, we're set on the facts, we can lose touch with the present moment, which is why I always say, come back to the body, come back to the breath, because that will bring you back into the here and the now. The here and the now is such an important place where we have to be discerning about how much time and space we're willing to give our thoughts. We have to be careful about what it is that we think. And you've heard that saying, don't believe everything you think. And that is really good advice, in my opinion, when we're talking about Gemini. Now, Gemini is also about youthfulness. It's what we learn when we're young. It's what we come to think about, the style of thinking that we cultivate from being a young person. And so we have to be careful, or rather we have to stay on top of it when we just allow our thoughts to just kind of be the same old thoughts that they've always been, because they're not always mature and they don't always shift and change with what we've learned and what we've experienced. These are the kind of people that get stuck on a certain way of seeing the world because that's how my parents saw the world. And that's where we zoom out and we look across the zodiac to Sagittarius, because Sagittarius is a more mature wisdom. Sagittarius is the wisest of the fire signs. That doesn't mean that it is without shadow, but with Sagittarius, it's where we zoom out and we have the perspective. Now we know that we can believe certain things to be true because that's what our parents believed, our friends, our teachers, our city, our culture. And that would fall more under the auspices of Gemini. And then we get out into the world. We grow up a little bit. We go out and we socialize with different kinds of people. We travel. We see different levels of poverty and wealth. We come into contact with people of different religions, different belief systems, and people that are just not the same as us. And it does help to shape our world. And it starts to give way into what we believe. So Gemini thinks, Sagittarius believes. Jupiter, as a ruler of Sagittarius, reminds us that it is all about expansion. And the more that we are out doing Sagittarian things, like learning about anything new, traveling, reading books, writing, the more that we can do that, the more that we become whole. We are no longer so dependent on that youthful part of ourselves, but rather we are moving out into the world. We're seeing things differently, and we are creating our own belief system. It becomes less about our conditioning and more about what we know to be true. And with Jupiter, we're always looking at what brings meaning. We look at Sagittarius as a ruler of things like philosophy and things like religion. Sag is the higher level beliefs, the way that we see the world, the things that become somehow greater than us, where it's not just about me and my brain and what I think, and it's more about taking the bigger picture, looking at the perspective. Think about how those two things interact in your own life. Are you more of a thinker or are you more of a believer? Do you spend more time in Gemini trying to gather facts, trying to make sense of them, trying to have conversations, and maybe in some way getting lost in that mind, in that mental chatter? Or do you spend more time out looking at the bigger picture, being curious about what other people are doing, what other people are thinking? And like I said, it's not that Sagittarius is without shadow. We will dive into the shadow of Sagittarius, in fact, and that will be next week. So it's not that Gemini is bad and Sag is good or vice versa. It's more that as a personal conversation with self, as you're exploring this axis of the mind, if you're somebody that is heady, somebody that thinks a lot, somebody that's conceptual and always trying to make sense of what is going on, then you are very likely hanging out in this axis a lot. So the question then becomes, do you spend more time as the student, which is Gemini in nature, or as the teacher, which is Sagittarian in nature? Being a student is great. We should all be perpetual students. And being teacher is great. We all have powerful things to teach others, but we want to make sure that there's a balance to that. So give that some thought this week.